Hey, what's up gentlemen and ladies? Welcome back to another Final Fantasy discussion, and today I'm going to be basically remaking one of my older videos. This is the first time that I ever do anything like this, but I figured that my old character names video was pretty outdated considering all of the new characters that we've gotten to see since then, and also, you know, it wasn't 100% accurate exactly. For the most part, I just kind of threw the names into Google Translate and was done with it, but as anyone who speaks more than one language will tell you, that is never a good idea. So this time around, I actually got help for this video from someone who's studied Latin, so huge shout out to Paulina. I will leave a link to her DeviantArt in the description if you guys want to check her out, but with that, let's get started with the video. Now first off, we got the game's protagonists, starting off with the main character, Noctis. Now, Noctis is the genitive form of Nox, which means night. Yeah, get ready for a lot of poorly translated Latin names. His full name, Noctis Lucis Caelum. Lucis is the genitive form of lux, meaning light, and Caelum just means sky. The name roughly, but not exactly, translates to light of the night sky. Next up, we got Gladiolus Amicitia. Now, Gladiolus is the diminutive form of Gladius, which means sword in Latin, and it's where we get, words like gladiator from, and his last name, Amicitia, means friendship, which best translates to little sword of friendship or short sword of friendship. Ignis was originally going to be named Ignis Stupeo Scientia, but later on, for unknown reasons, they dropped his middle name, making it just Ignis Scientia. Now, Ignis by itself just means fire, finally finishing off the trend of Final Fantasy characters named after the elements in Latin. Stupeo is the first person singular of stupere, which means to be surprised or astonished, and finally Scientia means knowledge or science. His full name is something like Fire of Knowledge or Fire of Science, and together with his middle name it would have meant Fire Stuns or Astonishes with Knowledge. And to round off your main party, Prompto. Nah, I'm kidding. Prompto Argentum. Now, his first name in Latin is the masculine dative form of promptus, which means to be determined or eager, and Argentum is simply silver, which is where Argentina gets its name from. Hashtag Fun Facts with Dean. Now, in general, you can tell that what they meant to write was Quicksilver, but apparently the phrase has really crappy construction, so your name is a mistranslation, Prompto. Now we go on to Cor Leonis, everyone's favorite fifth wheel. Nah, I'm kidding. So, Cor is simply heart or soul in Latin, and Leonis means lion, so quite literally heart of a lion or lion heart, just like Squall. And is it just me, but every time that I hear the word Leonis, I think of Leona Lewis, the lady who did the main theme for Final Fantasy 13. I don't know why, I just always hear that in my mind, but anyways, moving on. Lunafreya Nox Fleuret, or in non-weeaboo talk, Lunafreya. Her nickname Luna by itself just means moon in Latin, and the Freya part can be traced back to good old Scandinavia. The name comes from Freya, the Norse goddess of fertility, beauty, war, and a whole bunch of other stuff that I don't have time to mention in this video. The actual version used in the game without the J, you could say is Old Norse for goddess or lady, so her first name would be something like Moon Goddess or Lady of the Moon. Nox is the actual Latin word for night, and Fleuret, her surname, is the French word for a foil sword, which Luna used back in the Versus days when she was known as Stella, which I'm sure most of you know by now means star in Latin. And cool little Easter egg that you can find in some of the older 15 trailers is that Luna was wearing a necklace with a crescent moon and star referencing her two names, although this was later removed and turned into just a moon because of its resemblance to the star and crescent symbol in Islam. I guess Square didn't want any religious symbolism in the game, but back on topic though, her full name is actually quite long and hardish to decipher, but you could say that it means Night Foil of the Moon Goddess, or Lady of the Moon's Foil of the Night, that basic type of thing. But back in the Stella days though, it would have just been simply Star Night Foil, so yeah. Next. Finally, we move on to some of the non-playable characters, and that begins with King Regis Lucis Caelum, the 113th. Now, I already explained Lucis Caelum when I talked about Noctis, and the numbers should be pretty self-explanatory. His first name, though, Regis, is just like Noctis, the genitive form of a word, in this case, Rex, which is Latin for king. So yes, gentlemen and ladies, quite literally, King. The translation is a bit rough, but the point was basically King of the Sky's Light, or King of the Light's Sky. Now, Sydney Aurum was supposed to be a female version of the name Cid, since originally Sydney was supposed to be Final Fantasy 15 Cid, but this was later changed in the English version of the game to Cindy for unknown reasons. Her surname, though, translates to gold in Latin, so either Cindy Gold or Golden Cindy, whichever one you prefer. Her grandfather, on the other hand, was turned into the actual Cid of the game, Cid Sophiar. His last name Sophiar could come from the Greek word Sophia, which means wisdom, and actually, funny enough, if you do some research on the name Cid itself, it actually comes from the Spanish-Arabic loan word Cid, which means master or lord, so Lord of Wisdom or Wise Master. That's a pretty cool name. Then we move on to waifu Gentiana, the one with the theory that she is Leviathan that everybody wants me to mention. There. I mentioned it. Now, her name is actually a little bit harder than some of the others. She could be named after King Genthios of Rome, which would be pretty cool, but realistically, she's probably just named after the flower genus, which is substantially less interesting to say the least. And also, no, I am never letting this go. My friends and I, in an older video, decided to codename her Flora until we found out her actual name, and you know, Flora, flower, Gentiana is a type of flower. Hashtag Tabata watches my videos confirmed. Speaking of characters named after flowers though, next up we got little sister Iris from Brotherhood. So yeah, again, Iris is a genus of flower as well, however their likely intended meaning is from the Latin word iris, which means rainbow. So the colored part of your eye is named after that because, you know, iris, rainbow, color, you know. Now, just like her older brother Gladio, her last name is Amicitia, meaning friendship, so maybe colorful friendship or rainbow friend? And finally, in terms of the good guys, we actually have the two dogs. Yeah, Prina and Umbra. Now, I couldn't really find much on Prina other than the fact that it's an actual last name in real life. It's Welsh for buying or to buy something, and then Umbra is Latin for shadow, which is kind of funny when you think about it because he likely lives with Luna in Tenebrae, which literally means darkness. But let's go ahead and move on to some of the villains of Final Fantasy XV, shall we? First up, we got Fedora Man, Marluxia, purple-haired guy, Chancellor, Arden Izunia. Now, his first name, Arden, is actually a variant of the Celtic Gaelic Arden, which is eagerness or someone with high expectations, which makes sense considering he's the freaking Chancellor of the Empire. And his last name, Izunia, could come from the Japanese word Izuna, which means weasel, so Eager Weasel. That's a pretty funny name, all things considered. Next up, Emperor Idolus Aldercapt. Now, Idolus comes from the Greek word Eidolon. Yes, like the Fabula Nova Crystallis Eidolons, logo Lady Etro included. This is where we get the word idol from, which by definition is someone or something of worship. So pretty self-centered, aren't you, Idolus? I mean, yeah, you're the leader of the villain empire in the game, but geez, man. As for the last name, Aldercapt, well, capt could refer to the Latin word caput, which means head, root, origin, and the way that I see it, it's kind of like the German Heim in things like Solheim and Niflheim, meaning home of the sun, for example, or names like Johnson and Stevenson, meaning son of John or son of Steve. I kind of saw it in that way, Aldercapt being like from the alder, although it could just mean alder roots, like tree roots in an alder tree, but yeah, I'll let you guys figure out his full name meaning by yourselves. Next up, we got Hooded Man Ezio wannabe, Ravis, who once again, everyone for some reason wants me to mention. There, I mentioned him. So Ravis is actually related to Luna, his full name being Ravis Nox Fleuret, which is pretty odd, I'm not gonna lie, that they for some reason have the same middle name, but Ravis is basically just a shade or color in Latin. It could be a grayish or a tawny depending on how you look at it, but his full name is roughly Grey Knight Foil or Foil of the Grey Knight, something along those lines. Moving on to the general himself, Glauca. His name is actually, believe it or not, the female form of Glaucus, which, just like Ravis, is a color, some kind of like bluish shade, but female form. That's interesting, isn't it? What does that say about who could be under the mask? I guess we'll find out. Verstal, on the other hand, there wasn't really much on his name other than the fact that the ending AEL makes it sound like some kind of angel name, and it's also apparently pretty common in Hebrew names, but other than that, I got nothing. And finally, we got Aranea Highwind. Now, her last name, just like Cid, doesn't really mean much, and it's just a Final Fantasy staple for Dragoons, but I think that it would have been cool if, like with Lionheart, they translated it and made it someone's name. What would that be? Ventus Excelsis. Sounds badass, I should have gone with that. Anyways, her first name, Aranea, is just Latin for spider, which makes sense when you see her moving and twirling around her spear like a spider. And now we move on to some of the Kingsglaive characters from the upcoming Final Fantasy XV movie, starting off with the protagonist, Nyx Ulric, and this is where a lot of the names start getting a little bit less Latin, which makes sense considering that the glaive is comprised of immigrants, not from Lucis, so the fact that even their names have different origins is a pretty cool detail. Anyways, Nyx is actually ancient Greek for knight, which damn, they're obsessed with the night, aren't they? Like, we've seen characters named Moon, Star, Shadow, Darkness, with this now 3 different versions of the word night itself, but that's besides the point. And the last name Ulric could be from Old German Udalrich, meaning to have a strong heritage, once again, which ties into the whole foreigner thing, so strong ties to wherever they happen to be from. Next up, Luche Lazarus. Now, Luche could come from the Italian word luce, spelled without the H, which means light, and his last name Lazarus is just a reference to Saint Lazarus of Bethany from the Bible. Hey, whatever happened to no religious connections, eh, Square? Double standards much? No, but in the story, Lazarus is revived by Jesus 4 days after he dies, so now you guys know, if Luche dies in Kingsglaive, don't trust them, it's all a lie. Moving on to Libertus Ostium, his first name shouldn't be very hard to figure out. It comes from the Latin word libertatem, which means freedom, and ostium means door, so he is entrance to freedom or something along those lines. Drautus, on the other hand, is a bit harder, but from what I could find, it comes from the Greek name Drados, which supposedly has to do with freedom and liberty, because I guess they couldn't come up with anything else, so yeah. And finally, from the main cast, we have Crow Altius. Now, Crow without the E is obviously just, you know, a crow, like the bird, and Altius is the neutral comparative form of altus, Latin for high, sublime, impervious, hidden, you get the deal. So basically hidden crow, or something along those lines. Our final member of Gladius' family in FF15 is Clarus Amicitia, and his first name is the male form of Clara in Latin, which means clear or bright, and it's where we get names like Claire from. Lightning. His full name translates to clear friendship. Getting onto some of the support characters for Kingsglaive, we got Sonitus Bellum. Sonitus is Latin for noise or loud, and Bellum, which reminds me of Bellum Garden, actually means war, so his name is Loud War or Noisy War. Next up, Axis Aura. Now, apparently Aura can be Latin for earnest, so Ernest Axis? Yeah, I don't know. Some of the Kingsglaive names get weird. As for Tread Furia, I couldn't really find anything for his first name, but his last name, Furia, is pretty obviously Latin for fury, meaning that he'll probably be a short-tempered character. And finally, yes, the actual last character of the entire video, Plena Cara. Now, his first name, Plena, is a form of the Latin word plenum, meaning full, and Cara is, believe it or not, Arabic for the word shit. I am not kidding you guys, they literally named a character full of shit. I couldn't make this up if I tried. And there you go, those are all of the name meanings of the characters from Final Fantasy XV. Definitely one of the FF casts with the most symbolism in their names, so I hope that you guys enjoyed, since it can give us quite a bit of insight on the characters themselves without actually, you know, having to know their personalities and all that kind of stuff. But either way, that's all that I have for you guys today. I hope that you guys enjoyed. If you did, be sure to blitz that like button, subscribe, and as always, stay tuned for all things Final Fantasy!